This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. This podcast is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you're looking for help, seek out a qualified medical services provider or other healthcare professional. Welcome to the Live Your Yoga podcast, a podcast dedicated to discovering and sharing all the ways in which yoga can be lived off the mat. Real stories by real people, just like you. Welcome to the Live Your Yoga podcast. I have with me today Kristen McCarthy. She's a friend of mine. I've known her for a long time. I can't even remember when we met, but apparently she can. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I mean, I remember when, but just not the exact year. So Kristen is a registered clinical counselor and yoga teacher based in Vancouver, Canada. Her somatic approach to therapy arises from over 25 years of exploring the connection between mind and body, and is inspired by both Eastern philosophy and Western psychology. She's the creator of Yoga with Kristen YouTube channel, the certified online Yoga Nidra program as well, which is called Journey into Wisdom, and the online yin yoga platform, The Heart of the Heart. And we're going to talk about all of these things. Currently, Kristen teaches yoga and works as a therapist in her East Vancouver community. Thank you so much for joining me, Kristen. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So when I think about Kristen, certain words come to mind based on my experiences with her for more than 15 years, for sure, at least. And I use these words often when I talk to people about Kristen because I frequently recommend her YouTube channel for clients and for friends and loved ones. And these are the words that tend to come out when I describe her: authentic, calm, comforting, present, and quiet wisdom. And these are the words that I usually throw a few of those out. I recommend her YouTube channel and her yoga practices to clients and loved ones so that they understand why I'm recommending it. And I think I've been recommending it for nearly 6 years now. Does that make sense, Kristen? Did you start that channel nearly 6 years ago?
Yeah, I started it right at the pandemic. So 2020.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's brought relief and offered support to many people, including me, when I am looking for a quiet, grounded, simple, effective yoga practice to help relieve some physical tensions or soothe emotional turbulence. It's sincerely your practices that I turn to. I just feel like I can really trust you to offer a grounded, quiet, present, clear practice that supports me. And I know that your channel's mostly yin, but I've done the few hatha practices that you have as well. Yeah. But enough about my experience. Okay, we're going to talk about you. So I know that I'm really curious to hear about your whole journey, because even though we've known each other for years, I don't think I have a clear picture of how everything has gone over this more than a decade and a half that we've been acquainted and have been friends. So tell me about how you got started with yoga, and maybe you can share with the audience when and how you were introduced to yoga, and then give us a picture of the path that brought you where you are today.
Wow. Well, first of all, I want to say that as a teacher, I've truly learned from the best. And Angie, you've been such an inspiration for me on my journey. When I met you, I was just getting started, and you were already pretty established in your teaching practice. And you've really planted a lot of seeds for me along the way, especially with Ayurveda. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
And we've known each other for 16 years. We met in 2010.
Okay. Wow.
Yes. So when I was, invited me onto this podcast, I kind of looked back at the path of my yoga journey. And it's so crazy and interesting how everything has come together the way it has. Because in the moment when you're following this path, it kind of feels like going into the woods and there's no clear direction. I was just following my intuition. But to look back now and to see all the pieces of the puzzle come together, it's quite extraordinary. For me, I think the seeds of the yoga practice were planted in different ways in my life. Like, for instance, I practiced ballet when I was growing up, and I had a lot of what I would call yogic experiences as a dancer, and also started to develop like a somatic perception in my body. And it was the first time I really was exposed to yoga, because back in, say, 1999, the year 2000, yoga wasn't a big thing in the culture here in Vancouver. It might have been kind of blossoming down in California, but for a 20-year-old in Vancouver, there wasn't a lot of it out in the culture. And so my first experience was actually from a video that my mom bought at Costco and brought home. That was Rodney Yee's AM PM yoga. So that was my first experience of the yoga practice, and it felt very familiar to me because of my ballet background. I was like, I know this space. And then I took a meditation course at a local community center, which was a 6-week course, and that was really foundational. That was, I had some profound experiences there that made me more interested in yoga teachings. And I took my first actual class at Prana Yoga when it was in Yaletown on Mainland Street. So I remember walking past a sign that said yoga, and I was like, oh, I know that. I'm interested in that. Don't really know what that really is. So I went and started taking some classes at Prana Yoga. And back then, the experience of going into a public yoga class, first of all, there weren't many at all in Vancouver. And it's totally different than what we might experience today. So it's very traditional. So when I went into that class, we focused less on like the physical asana, and there was a lot more meditation and philosophy. So I remember my first class, we did candle gazing, we did walking meditation, and
Wow.
the teacher, yeah. And I was like, this is weird, and I'm in. If it's weird, I'm in. And everyone there was like in pajama pants. Like, it wasn't cool to the public yet, but it was cool to me.
I remember that. I remember going to one of my first yoga classes in what was it? Well, my very first was in the mid 90s, 95, but I remember that then I tried it again after a few years not doing it. I tried it again in the year 2000, and I remember it was a class like in a community center, and the teachers in my first classes between 95 and 2000 always brought all their own props, and the teacher in 2000 that I was just talking about, she would bring, some kind of wisdom cards, and she'd put the cards out and everyone would look at a card and then have a theme. And yeah, I mean, maybe some people do that now, but I remember it was a very slow community together kind of vibe. So yeah. Anyway, please continue. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember the teacher, Shakti, so after class, we would all get tea, and then we'd gather around her, and then she would share like yoga philosophy or her yoga journey with us. And we would stay there for about a half an hour just talking with her and unpacking the class, which is amazing. I wish we had time for that now in our studio system, but things have shifted quite a bit. But that experience really planted a seed for me. And I went away to university after that and wasn't really practicing a lot of yoga, but it was always there in the back of my mind that I got to get back to that. And I moved back to Vancouver. So I moved away to Victoria, and then I moved back to Vancouver in about 2004. And my roommate at the time had a pass at Semper Viva Yoga, and she asked me if I wanted to come. So I went, I bought a 3-month pass, and ever since that moment, I started a regular committed practice and going several times a week. And it completely transformed. I had about 2 years left of the university, and it completely transformed my university experience for sure. And that was where I was, I was first learning hatha yoga. It's like kind of the foundation of my practice. But I was also at the same time learning yin yoga with Bernie Clark, who's a popular yin yoga teacher and trainer in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to practice with Bernie back when there was 14 people in the class was such an amazing experience. And so that really planted the seed also for that particular style of yoga. And then what really happened for me, I think the big turning point. So I was finishing up some electives at university, and I decided to take yoga teacher training at the same time, more for my own interest. So I had zero plans to teach. That was not on my agenda at all. I'd actually gone to school for writing, and I wanted to be a writer. I was a writer. And what happened was that during that last year at school, when I was completing my yoga teacher training, about 6 months after I graduated from school, I'd started to develop chronic widespread pain and inflammation in my body. And that was a massive destiny point in my life, I would say. It turned everything around in my life. Like I couldn't move towards the writing career that I wanted. I couldn't even use my arm. I had trouble using my right arm for about a year. And during that time, everything just started to unravel. And that's when I started asking a lot of deeper questions about my life and what was happening for me. And I had to quit the job that I was at, but I still needed to work. And I remember that I had an image flash in my mind of a candle and me lighting a candle on a windowsill. Wow. And I remembered Semper Viva Yoga because I had actually applied there once to be a teacher. And they told me that you can't just apply to be a teacher, as a brand new teacher. You have to come in and work at the front desk and you kind of work your way up. That's what they told me. And at the time, I wasn't interested in that. But then when this vision came of lighting the candle, I thought of Semper Viva, and I'm like, I really would love to work there and just be in a really calm, regulated space where I can heal. So that was my only intention in applying for that job. It wasn't even to teach yoga. It was just a place I could go where I could heal. And so I applied, and like within a week, I had been hired there, and I started working there at the front desk. And that's when I met you in 2010.
Yes, that is, I knew that we met there. I just didn't know what year it was because I thought I started there. I started there around 2008 or 9, I think. So I just couldn't remember when it was that you showed up. You said that yoga really changed your university experience. So what you've just told us about now, is that what you meant when you said that?
How it changed my university experience?
Yeah, you had said that you said that it really changed your experience at university, unless I misheard you. And then you told us about how you started experiencing this pain in your body, and
Right.
then you remembered Semper Viva, and you remembered that opportunity there. And I was just curious, if I heard you right, and you did say that it somehow really changed your university experience to have already known about yoga. I was wondering if you meant that sort of moment where there was that shift, or if there was something else about yoga that really affected your experience as a student.
I think there's two parts to that question. The first part, on one level, it allowed me to like more mental space. So I would be in class all day, be totally burnt out, then go to yoga. And then I come back from yoga feeling totally refreshed. My mind felt refreshed, and I could go and do the 3 hours of homework that I had to do. So in that sense, that's one way that it impacted being at university, was I had more capacity. I had more nervous system capacity. I started producing my best work as a writer as well. But the other part of that question, when you frame it like that, it makes me realize that I think with the practice of yoga, there's an unwinding that starts to happen where we are starting to deconstruct nervous system dysregulation that we have. And I think what was also floating up to the surface over a few years, so over those few years when I then went into training, was a lot of, we call them samskaras in yoga, but a lot of the deeper psychological impressions started to come up to the surface for me to work through. And for me, that was a huge part of what created the chronic pain in my body. It wasn't the yoga practice itself, but it was having to face and reconcile some of the stuff that had happened in the past that had impacted my nervous system. And I'd finally created enough regulation in my nervous system to be able to start that type of deeper psychological work.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you're a podcast host or someone wanting to be interviewed on podcasts as a guest, visit podmatch.com. Podmatch automatically connects ideal podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. We always say it works just like a dating app, but instead of connecting you for dates, it connects you for podcast interviews. Podmatch has connected over 85,000 guests and hosts together for interviews that listeners love, all while saving you countless hours of administrative work through built-in automations. If you're ready to level up your podcast interviews on either side of the mic, start today by visiting podmatch.com.
Wow. Yeah. This reminds me of, I recently listened to a podcast by someone I really like, because you're now a therapist. I'm now an acupuncturist and registered massage therapist. We both bring yoga to our current work. But anyway, I was listening to this acupuncture podcast, and it was with a guest who was talking about going to acupuncture school, and how the guest said that she felt like many people are not prepared for what happens to them when they encounter Eastern traditional medicine, and how it impacts, their mind and their heart, and as such their life, because of views, because of perspectives, because of how it sort of reorders the way that we think about the world. Because we're looking from different angles, we're calling things maybe by different or alternative names. And it can be so impactful, whether it's yoga or another Eastern philosophy. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Oh, and when you were talking about reordering, that's exactly what happens, right? Your whole psychological system starts to reorganize itself.
Yeah.
And when that happens, there's things we're going to need to sit with and work through.
Yeah. I like the space here to just let that sink in.
Yeah. But of course, at the time, I didn't fully realize that is what was happening. But since then, as a teacher, I've seen that many times with students. There's the love affair with yoga that starts, right? You feel so amazing. And then after a few years of committed practice, a lot of stuff comes up to the surface.
Well, this is a beautiful segue to talk about the way in which you hold space for people to go through these processes with your various endeavors, both as a teacher of Yoga Nidra and a yin yoga teacher with your channel, with your trainings, and as a therapist. So I'm curious about where we just ended. You started working at this, yoga studio, and then you were doing some training for yin yoga. And so we know that that's when you encountered yin yoga. What were the experiences that made you realize that you wanted to share these styles more widely and then teach others how to teach them, and so on? Take us through that.
That's a big question, because that period of my life from 2010 to 2020 was huge for me in terms of my development. So much happened. There was so much deconstruction and reconstruction that happened. And the thread through all of that was the chronic pain. So the chronic pain became like a teacher for me. So as I moved into actually teaching yoga classes, I was at a point where I had to completely throw out the way I was practicing before. I had to rebuild my practice from scratch with a lot more care and mindfulness, and knowing what it now felt like to be in a body that felt vulnerable and felt where I had to be careful because any wrong move could create like a 6 to 8 week pain cycle. So I learned how to be gentle. And I think that is a huge key for how my teaching practice developed. Was then when I began to teach, I started to have more empathy and awareness for what people were coming into practice with, what it was like to be in a body that had limited capacity and that there was pain going on. So it could be emotional pain or physical pain, because for me, that experience of chronic pain had both, right? It was physical pain, the emotional pain, and spiritual pain. And that created a sensitivity in me for what was happening for other people. So during that time, my practice became more gentle. And I feel like it was really the yin, like I love teaching hatha yoga as well, but it was really the yin yoga practice that I think brought me into the seat of the teacher, that really taught me how to be a teacher. And what I learned from that practice was how to be receptive in holding space for others, and how to help other people turn inside and look inside of themselves. And as I went along as a teacher, my practice, as I said, became more and more gentle, because that would, in my own meditation, in my own practice, that was the message that kept coming through. You think you're being gentle, but can you be even more gentle? And to help other people like discover that same gentleness and sensitivity for themselves, for what they were going through. And it was through my own experience and really having to look at each layer of that experience. So really looking at the physiological layer, what was happening in my body physically, looking at the psychological layer and the spiritual layer, that helped me over, I'd say, like several years, create more of an like a integrative approach to teaching and also to the therapy that I do now. I don't know if I'm answering your question, your original question.
You are, and you're really, I just have this, I guess it's kind of similar to the experience, even though you're just talking and telling me a story about your experience. I'm having a similar experience to the one I have when I do your classes, of just feeling like someone. I guess I'm really hearing that quiet wisdom come through. And what I mean by that is, you know, it really hit me hard in the most beautiful, gentle way when you talked about becoming more and more gentle. And even when you think you're being gentle, can you be even more gentle? Asking this question of yourself and allowing that to be the shape and the feel of the container that you create for others with the way that you teach.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's absolutely it. Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I remember my experiences of you 16 years ago. And, you know, even when I would just see you, like you said, you started at the yoga studio working. I think we called folks yoga advisors or something like that when they worked in the front.
Yeah.
And you, to be honest, I think that to the casual onlooker, it would have been virtually impossible to know that you were living with a pain condition, because you really, I remember that you being really the picture of calm and presence right from the beginning, you know, right from 16 years ago when we first encountered one another. And so to think that that was going on and that was still your general, air quotes, aura, so to speak. It's really, it's just really impactful then to think about how you've now had since then 16 years to lovingly cultivate this quality of self-care that you now support others in doing for themselves or in holding space to do for others. So I welcome you to share more on that, because I think I sort of jumped in, but I would love to hear more about, what just whatever you want to share about how it is that you support others through your programs, through your trainings, what those look like, and any part of the inspiration that brought you to that.
Yeah, I think the common thread with everything in terms of my own journey and then how I support other people is that common thread of simply turning back towards yourself and dropping into your center. So it's coming back home to yourself in a way. And that's a step-by-step process. So there's a lot of layers in that process. In order to do that, we have to first build the capacity in our nervous system to even sit with ourselves at all, to be grounded and calm with ourselves, to sit with and hold any physical pain that might be coming up, to hold the emotional layer of that pain, to hold space for anything that we're going through in our lives. So, I realized at one point as a teacher that a lot of people coming into class, we don't always know their story, but a lot of people that do share their stories over time, you find that there's people coming in with all kinds of crisis going on in their lives, whether that be something external or internal. And just creating you were describing like a container, right? Having a space where people can first come and just feel a sense of calm and peace, even if it's just in the environment around or how the teacher's holding space. That helps them to build that type of space inside of themselves. It helps them build that, that capacity to hold a container for themselves, even if they're not in the yoga space. So when we're in the yoga space, we're practicing that. We're practicing how to hold a container for ourselves, how to regulate our nervous system. And everything that I've done in terms of teaching and, now stepping into like a therapist role is literally just to help people discover that capacity inside of themselves and then to move back into their center. And again, working through the layers of whatever comes up, because there's all types of things that come up that can make us feel that we are separated from ourselves or we're separated from our center. And it's a step-by-step process of grounding back into center.
Tell me how Yoga Nidra figures into this and the way that you support others with specifically that practice, but also yin yoga if it weaves into it. Because you have trainings, right?
I do. Yeah. So it's interesting because Yoga Nidra, I first discovered when I was training as a yoga teacher, but we did just such a small snippet of it. But I remember thinking at the time, and this was like in 2009, I had like the classic Yoga Nidra text. And I remember thinking, I'm going to need this one day and just kind of put it away in my shelf. And during that period of 2010 to 2020, when I was doing my whole life was focused on the healing work, I was doing so many trainings. So I took a Yoga Nidra training. And at that time, I was also, working in other capacities. I was working with plant medicines and having really heightened, intense experiences there. And so when I came to Yoga Nidra, I thought, this will be a great tool, but I wasn't expecting it to be as powerful as it actually was. So I remember my training with Yoga Nidra really blew my mind because it had such a massive impact. And having done things that were so extreme or so intense, I wasn't expecting such a gentle, kind of simple but layered practice to have such an impact on my nervous system. And it really brought a lot of things to light for me. So I was really able to work on the different pieces of the healing journey that I needed to work on through that training that I did. And then I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I want to explore Yoga Nidra more. And so I started, because I was a writer, I started writing my own Yoga Nidra scripts and bringing them into the yoga studio that I worked at. So I started having Yoga Nidra nights. And I did that for years, and it was popular. People really loved the practice. And then it came to a point, maybe after like 5 years of doing that or so, I had the idea to create an online program. This was about 2019. So it was a year before the pandemic. And this idea just popped into my head. I think I'd seen on Facebook, everyone's doing programs now, but back then it was just a few people. And it was actually the owner of Semper Viva Yoga, Gloria, who I noticed was doing an online program. And I became really curious. And I thought, I'm going to put together some Yoga Nidra recordings and do like a little self-help course for people that I can offer to my students. And then when I started to put it together, it became like a huge project because I'm so detailed and I like to research. So as I was putting together the program, I started to really pull together all the different threads of what I had learned since 2010. So I was pulling together not only the threads of what I learned about Yoga Nidra, but also my whole healing journey. So it became like a thesis project on my own healing journey. And that's why it's called Journey into Wisdom. And I realized as I was writing it, it took me about a year to write. I was writing the different lessons and lectures, that it was also a training program. So I had two components to it. One was walking people through the healing process, through the different layers of self. And then the other thread was the teacher training thread. And when I put it all together, I was like, wow, I just spent a year building this. I have like zero online experience. I was barely using Facebook at that time. So I had to do another training. I had to do a business training for online business because I was completely green. And I launched the program about 6 months before the pandemic. And thank God I did, because when the pandemic came, I lost all of my yoga work, right? Everything shut down. And when it reopened at, minor capacity.
Yeah.
And so I was able to have that so I was just basically, the online world was just all I had at that time to continue as a teacher. And that's when, so I built the yoga program first, or the Yoga Nidra program first. And then the pandemic came that winter, and I decided to launch a YouTube channel because I just pivoted. I was just like, okay, we'll have to do something different. And so that's what I did.
So you were teaching yoga full time when the pandemic hit?
Yeah, I was teaching full time and doing workshops and retreats, and then everything just shut down. And it's funny because I look back and I was really burnt out actually at that point when the pandemic came. So there was almost a sense of relief that being able to step back and get some space and to think differently about how I wanted to move forward. But almost right away, I did a little bit of research on how to create a YouTube channel, and that happened really fast. So within like a month, when the pandemic started, I think I got my first videos up and out with the help of my partner who works in film. So luckily I had access to film equipment, cameras that he provided. So that was really helpful because otherwise it would have been pretty expensive.
Amazing. Amazing. Obviously there are earlier adopters, but when we look now, we're 6 years into the future since you started your YouTube channel. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like everything, kind of was already percolating because you had just started the Yoga Nidra trainings and you had spent such a long time on that and then already had that ready to go. And then you started the YouTube channel as well. And, I wrote in my notes that you developed it entirely on your own, but of course you did have your partner's help, which is really fortuitous as well. And I'm wondering about the YouTube channel. Now, obviously, at any point in the sort of digital time frame that we start something, there are going to be different issues and different learning curves because the platforms are always changing.
Exactly.
But I'm just wondering if there were any significant challenges, victories, insights, aha moments, like anything that's worth sharing just because it's fun to share, because it was, meaningful or impactful, or because it would help our audience members who might be thinking about doing a YouTube channel themselves.
Yeah, when I first started, I like to put together like a blueprint or a plan before I start something. So I did have a bit of a blueprint. I did some studying on how, YouTube works, and it really is run by keywords. So you have to build your channel around specific keywords, which, it's a different way of teaching yoga, right? Like instead of I'm used to teaching a full, well-rounded class, but on YouTube, people are looking for yoga for hips or yoga for lower back pain. So starting to customize each practice to a specific keyword was an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
But because I had that roadmap, the first bit of it was kind of smooth sailing because I knew where I was going. I knew, what I wanted to do. But the biggest challenge, I think, was moving from teaching live in person where you're working with people and there's energy, right? Like when you're working with a group of people, it's a co-creation. There's energy in the room. But when you're working alone, that energy is not there. So you're spending most of your days setting up technical equipment, filming your class, and then you're editing the class, and then you're creating thumbnails and uploading it. And that actually ends up being like a full-time job. So I found myself at the computer all day, every day. And so I would say that was the biggest challenge for me in those few years of starting the YouTube channel and then transitioning. And I took all of the classes over to a membership and then added more to the membership. That was the challenging part, was just working at the computer all day.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for helping all of us with our big dreams to keep it real. Because
there's the labor.
Yeah, it's and I think, we're going on 6 years post-pandemic, shockingly right now. And so probably, but a lot of people who are listening to this maybe are already teaching online. And so, and maybe a lot of people listening to this may have learned online because a lot of our listeners have taken our online yoga teacher training. And a lot of our listeners may have primarily an online yoga teaching practice. And in fact, it's shocking. This is just hitting me now, but it never occurred to me that there might be a good number of people listening who've never taught in person.
I believe that.
Yeah. And so, we had this experience in our teaching path of walking into a room and, it's so completely different from, like you say, from teaching online. I would say the one benefit I find to teaching online, and this is very selfish, but true, is that when I teach online, I get to do the whole practice. I have to do the whole practice.
You do. That is such a key difference. You have to demonstrate.
Yes. Because in person, you don't do the whole thing, right? You need to be watching people moving around the room and so on. So I would say that's the one main benefit of teaching online is that you get to do the whole practice yourself. It's a bit different because you're talking through it, but
Yeah.
I would say for folks like us who have been, I don't know if you agree, but I would say that at this point in my teaching, because I'm nearly 20 years into teaching and yoga, and I find that it's quite natural for me to just talk my way through a whole class that I'm actually doing myself. And the other day, I taught a class online for Your Yoga Flow. And I felt so great after. I was like, oh, that was such a great class I taught because I got to do it myself. Does
Well,
that ever
I
happen
mean,
to you?
yeah, I mean, that's how I learned to teach when I was in my teacher training program. I didn't really have anyone to practice teaching on, so I would just do my practice and then I would notice what I was doing and say it out loud. So I developed my kinesthetic awareness of my body and how to turn that into language just through my own practice at first. But I'm the opposite of you. I actually don't like practicing while I'm teaching.
Ah, okay.
So actually, like, there was a point where I was shooting a lot of videos or online videos at once, and my body was so sore after because I'm not really in my own real practice, right?
Yeah.
So I stopped liking that. I actually like teaching in studio better because I don't have to demonstrate everything. So I'm the opposite of you. But I
Completely
also
understandable. Yeah, that you would prefer teaching actually in a studio. And I like aspects of both, of course. I love teaching. I love teaching in a studio environment as well. And I love that. I love the connection and the community. Do you teach any studio classes now?
I do. I still have a couple of classes that I keep. I want to make sure that I can maintain this skill. So yeah, I want to maintain the skill of teaching live with people. And I think another thing I wanted to say when you were just talking about the difference between kind of the experience that we had and then the experience of right now where people can just teach online. So one thing too that we had during that time in Vancouver where yoga was was getting so popular, so we had a really strong yoga teaching community. So I learned so much from other teachers that had been teaching for longer than me, going to their classes. And because Vancouver had become such a hub, there was a lot of, like, I guess, bigger name teachers from around the world that would travel here and do trainings and teach. So we really got a really solid education here and we were able to share in the community. And that's something I really miss, actually. And I think that that's really important in terms of developing as a teacher.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, all of that is true. And it really was sort of a moment in time that we were fortunate to be in, to just happen to be, the right place, the right time when yoga really was a burgeoning industry and there was a lot available. Like I remember I took in 2008, my first yin yoga workshop was with Paul Grilly, who's, a well-known yin yoga teacher. And yeah, I remember I thought, oh, I'll just go do this workshop. I liked the yin yoga introduction I got in my 200-hour teacher training in 2007. So I thought I'd check it out. And I had no idea who he was at the time because he wasn't anyone at the time. He was just one of the few people that was teaching yin yoga at that time who happened to travel up. I think he is from Portland or something like that. And anyway, yeah. So being in Vancouver at that time in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, was a very, very lucky stroke for folks like us in terms of getting a diversity of exposure and getting it sort of early on so that much like you starting your YouTube channel already 6 years ago, you're a seasoned professional now. And those of us who had the good fortune to be exposed to yoga in the early 2000s or even sooner have had this wonderful diversity this potpourri of opportunities to practice with people in person that aren't as easy to come by now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're still in Vancouver. I'm not in Vancouver anymore. I'm in Victoria, BC, which isn't too far away. But is there are there still a number of studios that a person can frequent in that city?
I feel out of touch really with what's happening. You know, I see some boutique studios popping up, but people have really moved on to different styles of like physical practice. So yoga is not, there's a difference now for sure.
Where do you go ahead?
I still teach at Open Door. Is that where you're going to
ask?
Do?
Yeah, I was going to ask where you teach now. Yes.
I mean,
cool.
It's like a mom and pop's place, right? But that's where I started teaching. And I just love the simple, down to earth nature of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I feel a little bit out of touch with what's happening in the rest of the city, but there's a massive shift, I would say.
Well, you only need a few good yoga studios, really, I would say, which is to say that I'm really glad that Open Door is still there, and I'm really glad that you're still at Open Door. So for anyone who's listening who's in Vancouver, you know where to find Kristen if you want to go to an in-person class. And maybe next time I visit, I can somehow coordinate to get there too, because I do really miss the in-person experience. There are actually only a few studios in Victoria as well.
Really?
A number of them, closed during the pandemic. Some of them tried to survive for a while, but eventually closed within, a year or two of the pandemic. And to be honest, I have converted almost completely to doing yoga online. Mm-hmm. So I actually use, even though I live in a 200 square foot tiny house, I have just enough room to do most things. A wild thing is hard because I need this lateral space that I don't have. But I practice actually with our own app, the Your Yoga Flow app. I practice with you, especially if I want to do yin yoga, obviously. And then I practice with my teacher from Vancouver, who now also only teaches exclusively online since the pandemic. She never continued with her in-person studio either post-pandemic. So anyway, it's an interesting world. And that is kind of a nice and logical segue to what you're doing now with all of these skills. I mean, you're still doing the Yoga Nidra and you're still doing the YouTube channel Yin Yoga, you're doing your trainings, but I know that you've started to funnel all of this experience, this insight into your therapy work. So tell us a little bit about sort of what got you there in terms of your training, and then also how it is that you sort of intermingle all of these skills and all of this experience into that.
Mm-hmm. That's such a big question. And I think that definitely the foundation comes from my yoga practice. Absolutely. Like my yoga and meditation practice, my own experience moving through chronic pain and having to navigate through that, I think led me in the therapeutic direction. And it's something I had been thinking about for a while, because when I was teaching, I'd never intended to teach. I just kind of ended up there. And then suddenly I was teaching a lot, and I got caught in that cycle of teaching and never really had a chance to just stop and move in any other direction until the pandemic hit. And that kind of disrupted that cycle I was in. But I had been for years thinking about counseling. And what really grabbed my attention in that direction was now the legitimacy of somatic therapy, which is the primary lens that I work through. Because within somatic therapy is everything I feel that I learned along in my journey. Everything for me started through the body and led me into like the deeper layers of myself. So I have a real reverence for the wisdom of the body And I think that in our society, we're disconnected from our body. Our minds are trained, but our body wisdom is left behind. And my yoga practice, especially the yin yoga, really brought me back in contact with that wisdom, which I would call the feminine wisdom. And that was the pathway to wanting to become a counselor, was seeing the opportunity to take what I had learned and to blend it with Western psychology and to work with people on the level of body awareness. So it seemed like a very natural next step for me. And wanting to move from working with groups of people, which is great, working one-on-one with people and to hone that skill.
That's wonderful. So how much time do you spend with your therapist practice right now? Is that sort of the majority of the work that you do?
I would say it's becoming the majority of the work. I'm still maybe at half capacity now. So I've been practicing for just under a year. So I'm new. But I am spending, I'd say the majority, maybe like 70% of my time in that direction. And then the other bit of time running the online, like I haven't been really building my YouTube channel at this point, but I'm still running my online membership. I'm
and
not
your
really.
YouTube channel has so much already on it, you know,
It has so much already.
It's huge. It's got 6 years of lots and lots and lots of
Yeah.
wonderful practices. So that's understandable to just kind of give it a moment to breathe.
Exactly. I needed a space to grow and change a little bit before deciding how I wanted to work with it going forward. I love that I had that resource out there for people. I love that it's free for people. That makes me happy. I love the people I've been able to connect with because of the YouTube channel and all the emails and the stories that people have sent me about what's going on for them and how yin yoga has helped them. That's really meaningful for me to be able to hear from people.
Yeah. I remember sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I remember when I decided what to do after when yoga was no longer really a viable option in my life, just because of certain opportunities drying up, even in the in-person world in Vancouver and so on. And I remember that one of the things I thought to myself, which is connected to what you just said about hearing from people who have done your practices with you on YouTube, is that I thought I'm really attached to this experience of going to work and having people thank me for doing my job. So I thought to myself, whatever I do next, I really want to keep having that experience. And that was really a guiding principle for me in deciding what to do next. But I also wanted to say that, again, in relation to you and the experience that you get to have, albeit from a distance, of these people, telling you on your YouTube channel how meaningful the practices have been for them and so on. Every time I do, I shouldn't say every time, but every time I do a practice with you on YouTube, I feel grateful. And then a few times I've actually bothered to write it in the comments too, because I think like, oh, I should really say this right now because I always feel so grateful. And then I think I should actually, and because I'm not one of those people that really comments on YouTube or, like I'm not a commenting person, but I have, made myself do it thinking like, I mean, A, I know you, and B, I mean, of course you want to hear that. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to do work, such a privilege to be able to do work where we can support people and then we get that wonderful, beautiful, fulfilling feedback so often from them that it has been meaningful for them as well. It's just such a beautiful circle of meaning.
It is. It's so true that we, as teachers, that we typically see the best of people, which is really a gift.
Yeah.
And I love when you comment because I love when people I know comment.
Makes the circle feel small, the world
Yeah.
feels smaller. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It feels like community, right?
Yes. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. So I wanted to know if you could just, is there, is there a way for us to, is there a way for you to sort of say a few words in terms of, you already said a little bit about who your online programs are for, and you talked about the two programs that you offer um, being sort of slightly different. One is for people, I think, in sort of in their own healing journey, and then one is for people who actually want to teach. So it's sort of a teacher
Mhm.
training. Can you just say a
Yeah.
little bit more about that and how people might find themselves in each category, or what types of people might be the ones who would be wanting to look for this part or that part or both
Yeah.
parts?
I would say that it's a program for people that are in a process of self-inquiry. And I've had students come through that actually don't have a yoga background at all. So it's all new to them. And then I've had a lot of yoga students come through. So I'd say it's primarily yoga students are interested in the program because of the certification. But also I've had massage therapists, people in the healing and wellness professions come through, other counselors. So those who are really interested in the inner process from that Eastern lens and
Now,
who
I
want to
go ahead.
I was just going to say who want to have a more experiential. So we're not just learning from our mind, we're learning from our own direct experience of the practice.
Yeah. Yes, and then I just had the thought. I was thinking, I don't know anything about therapists, counseling, but I know that these things are regulated differently in different provinces and in different countries. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, now that you have gone through, a counseling program, and you're a therapist and you do somatic therapy, would you say that for, let's say, someone who's a counselor from somewhere else, maybe they're just starting their counseling journey, or maybe they have a counseling sort of just a bit of a counseling background, or maybe not even a counselor, maybe even social workers. Like, do you think that your
Mm-hmm.
online programs could support people like that in their own practice and then in supporting others?
Absolutely. I think that Yoga Nidra is a tool that can be used in so many different ways, in so many different professions.
And
And
it's
even
so
if you just,
safe, right? It's completely
yeah,
safe.
it's so regulating. And there's so many ways. So you learn the different ways that you can apply it, right? Like you can apply it instead of doing a full length practice, you can also do shorter length practices with people that really focus on something specific like nervous system healing.
Hmm. I'm a registered massage therapist now, as I think you know, and I've often thought of using Yoga Nidra in my treatments, like asking people if
Mm-hmm.
they want to listen to a Yoga Nidra practice while they get massage.
That's amazing.
I know. I thought that would be and maybe, and it's not something that as yet I have done. And I think it's because it's different. And you said earlier in the podcast, you said if it's weird, I'm into it. When you first encountered a lot of the weird things about yoga. And I think that, as a new practitioner of anything, I think it's quite natural, even though I'm, on in years now, to feel a little bit intimidated by the idea of being the person that's weird and that stands out and is doing something different. And as much as I often have pride in that, so to speak, in areas where I'm very experienced. So
Yeah.
I will happily teach a yoga practice where I'm doing totally weird, crazy stuff, because I'm so at home in the yoga world.
Yeah.
But I guess as an RMT, because we're a regulated health profession
Yes.
in British Columbia, and I just have to think about like, okay, is this still within the scope of practice? And, will
Absolutely.
people just think it's strange? And how should I introduce it? But you're bringing
Mm-hmm.
me back to realizing that I honestly think it's worth me just taking a bit of time and thinking about how to present that as an option for people in case that's something that they want to do. Because even when you mention, shorter practices, longer practices, and so on. And of course, there are a couple of Yoga Nidra practices on the Your Yoga Flow, both the podcast and on the app that I've done. And so we only have very few in our offerings. But all that to say that I clearly love it, and I wouldn't talk through it myself. I would just play a recording for people. But I guess what I'm saying is just the applicability of Yoga Nidra is really incredibly broad. And I'm thinking now I've just become a registered acupuncturist, and now I'm just like, oh my gosh, I could also ask people if they want me to play it while they're resting with their needles in, right?
Or even just pulling out certain techniques from Yoga Nidra. So what I've seen training in counseling, taking different trainings from different therapists, is that a lot of Yoga Nidra techniques are used in these trainings. They're just not called Yoga Nidra techniques, but I recognize them.
Right.
So there's different, within a full length practice, we're working with different techniques through each stage of the practice. And sometimes you can just pull out one of those techniques.
Right, like the somatic awareness or the visualization
or the body, like the rotation of consciousness through the body, for instance, for nervous system reset, or working with opposite sensations.
Yes. Wow. I think you just blew my mind a little bit with bringing me back to something that I probably taught my first Yoga Nidra class, in 2008 or 2009. The Yoga Nidra teacher was sick at the YWCA, and they were like, can you teach his class? And I was like, I've never taught Yoga Nidra.
Awesome.
They were like, that's okay, we trust you. So I got a book. And
I would trust you too.
What's that?
I would trust you too.
Anyway, it's been so amazing to talk to you about all of this stuff. And I think that you are going to offer a promotion for our listeners. So if they see themselves in the people that you've described who might benefit from doing your trainings, they can have a look for this promo offer. The information will be underneath the episode description on the website. And there's one more question I want to ask you, although before I ask you, I just want to check and make sure that we have touched on everything that we want to touch on. So let's just take a moment to take a breath. Our audience can also take a breath, and we can just see if there's anything else that comes up that we want to share before you tell us how you live your yoga. So let's just take a breath. Anything come up?
I'm thinking now about the question.
Of course, I knew if I said it, that's what would happen.
You planted the seed.
Okay, so let's just go to that then. Let's finish as we always finish, which is asking every guest that honors us with their presence on the Live Your Yoga podcast. We ask, how do you live your yoga? And, I know there's you've already probably described literally at least 25 ways throughout the course of this podcast in which you live your yoga. But if there's anything else you want to share on that topic, then now is the time.
Yeah, I think right now in my life, it's just become really simple. And it's simply sitting with myself and creating space for simple meditation, like kind of stripped back from, I did a lot of studying in my 30s, and now I'm just at a place where I'm kind of stripping all that away and just dropping into the experience of literally just sitting with myself, listening to the rain, listening to the wind, noticing small moments through my day. And that grounds me back into my authenticity. And then I notice when I wander away and get lost in my mind for days, and then I come back. So it's a practice of returning back to those simple moments and having simple space for yourself, which I think is so important right now in the world, to know our own self and not get lost in a lot of the stuff that's happening out in the world.
Yes. Mindful presence as a
Yeah.
salve for
Mhm.
for the many twists and turns and the many peaks and valleys of the human experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's back to basics.
Back
The
to basics.
foundational work of yoga, which is
Yeah.
presence. And that's the hardest piece.
And that's why we have to keep coming back again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure to talk with you. And I'm really grateful for the time that you've given us to share your experience, your story, your insights, and just your lovely, grounded, quiet wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.